Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to FP1. Now in the last couple of days, Codemasters have been revealing their updated driver ratings for the F1 2020 game, and to say it hasn't caused a bit of controversy, well, that's a bit of an understatement. So what I thought I would do then would be to hop onto Photoshop and kind of tweak these cards a little bit and make them represent what I think of each of the drivers and then compare them back to the originals and share it with you guys. So obviously this is going to be a fairly controversial video, and I'm sure a lot of you will disagree with what I've said. I think that, maybe some of the choices, especially in the midfield, you'll maybe disagree with me. So let me know down in the comments below what each of your driver ratings would be, and yeah, we can have a nice little discussion down there. One last thing to note before we get started is, as of time of recording, we haven't got the stats out for McLaren yet, so I've kind of used Photoshop and my limited Photoshop ability to mock up my own card for that, and we'll go through each of my stats there and talk through why I put each number as it is, and then, yeah, when these cards come out, I'll compare them down in the comments. But with that all said and done there, let's jump straight into this. So let's start with Williams and the last team in the 2019 season. New driver in Nicholas Latifi for this year, and I've not really tweaked his card too much just because, yeah, he is a rookie. I think 64 rated is personally fair enough. The only thing I've really changed on him is his awareness as 80. For me, was a little bit too high, so I've lowered that from 80 to 78. I've not let that affect his overall rating though. I think the rest of his stats, 64 pace, 60 racecraft, 32 experience, that's absolutely fair enough. George Russell, on the other hand, he was done dirty here. I'm sorry, 75 overall, 78 awareness, 80 pace. This is the guy that's being tipped as the next Lewis Hamilton. This is the guy who could even find himself in a Mercedes as of next year. So for me, I think this card was massively undervalued. So I've made a few changes here and there. Let's get into them. So let's start with his awareness. He had a pretty solid last season, and I think, 78's a little bit too low. So I've raised that up to an 80. His pace as well. Yes, he was technically beaten by Kubica on points, but given how many times he overtook Kubica and finished ahead of him, for me, 85 pace is much more, respective of his caliber of driving, and 80 pace was just a way too low for me. In terms of its overall rating, 75 is way too low, so I've increased it up to an 80. I think that's probably better suited for a driver, again, of his caliber. And one thing that I just want to add in here, and I think would be interesting to see when the F1 game comes out, is whether these values will be static or they'll be dynamic. In other words, will these stay the same all throughout the career, or as George Russell, as Nicholas Latifi is a better example, goes through more seasons in his career, that, let's say, experience number increases, maybe his pace increases. Meanwhile, perhaps Hamilton's pace might decrease as he gets older and near his retirement. Be interesting if these stats change on the cards. Personally, I don't think they will, but hey, that's just my opinion. We'll see what happens. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Either way then, let's move on to the next team in Alfa Romeo. Now, Kimi Raikkonen's card I think I'm pretty happy with. 87 overall, 98 experience, that makes sense, he's the most experienced driver on the grid. 84 racecraft, yeah, fair enough. 91 awareness, definitely. 83 pace, I disagree with a little bit. I think, compared to some of the other drivers on the grid, I think 83 is a little bit low for a 2007 world champion, so I've increased it up to 85. Don't think that will change his rating much, so I've left his main rating still as 87. But it's Antonio Giovinazzi that I think is maybe being bigged up a little bit too much here. So Antonio Giovinazzi, I think, has been bigged up a little bit too much. Now, his experience, 47, is a little bit low for me personally. I think, what a lot of people forget is that Gio did a few races for Sauber back in 2017. So I've raised that up from 47 to 55. But the rest of his stats, I mean, racecraft is fine, but awareness and pace, he's been given a 70 to 79. I just think, given his 2019 season, the fact that it was fairly unimpressive at the end of the day, I've lowered those stats a little bit. So awareness, I've taken it down to a 68, and then pace, I've moved from 79 down to 75. For me, I just think that maybe represents his pace a little bit better. I feel like 79 is way too close to Kimi's original pace of 83, and I'm sorry, those drivers aren't on par. That's just my opinion anyway. His overall rating then, I've taken that from 73 down to a 70. I think that's a little bit more respective. Maybe it's a little bit harsh thinking back, but hey, that's just my opinion. Let me know if you agree or disagree down in the comments. Sticking with the Alphas, let's move from Alfa Romeo to AlphaTauri. Now, these guys, Pierre Gasly, Danny Kvyat, both Red Bull rejects. It's a bit harsh to say it like that, but it's true. Now, they've been done, I personally think, fairly well here. Kvyat, I've not changed much. 80 overall, 63 experience, 86 racecraft, 74 awareness. The 85 pace, though, I think for someone, especially if we compare to, say, Raikkonen's card, apparently Kvyat has more pace than Raikkonen. For me, I don't see that, so I've lowered that down to an 80. I've not changed his overall rating. I still think 80 is absolutely fair as an overall rating for Kvyat, but 85 pace for me was just a little bit on the high side. Now, Pierre Gasly, I've had a few more changes here. So, 87 awareness, that's the one stat that kind of sticks out to me, especially given his interesting season at Red Bull. The other stats I'm fairly happy with, but 87 has got to be lowered. I'm taking that into 79. That might seem harsh, but that's just my personal opinion. That's also, for me, taking his rating from an 80 to a 78. Out of the AlphaTauri drivers, I just personally rate Kvyat higher than Gasly. And if you think about the circumstances in which they were dropped from Red Bull, Gasly was dropped because he was a little bit rubbish. Kvyat was dropped because Max needed the seat, and Max was going to get snapped up by a Mercedes or Ferrari if he didn't. So I feel like Kvyat's been done very dirty in Formula 1, and yeah, 80 is a bit more of a representative value for him. Moving on then, let's talk about Haas. Now, for these guys, I feel like they've got them the wrong way around. So let me just break this down and explain it quickly. So let's start with Kevin Magnussen. Majority of his stats I think is fine. 65 experience, 79 racecraft, 73 awareness, 83 pace. Personally, I think is a little bit low. Magnussen is an absolutely rapid driver, so yeah, okay, his awareness and his crash tendency lets him down a little bit, but I increased that pace from an 83 to an 85. That, for me, I think, alongside his rating just being personally too low in 78, I've put that up to an 80. Now, the reason I've kind of done that is I'm comparing against his teammate here, and Grosjean, for me, just isn't an 80, especially in recent years with the mistakes that he's made. It kind of brings him back to the mistakes he was making when he first came into Formula 1 for the second time with Lotus in 2012. You know, an awareness of 77 I think is way too high, so I've brought that down to 73 to match his teammate. And experience, in fairness though, I have raised that from 75 to 79. I think, you know, for a driver that did his first race back in 2009, obviously came back in 2012, 75 was a little bit low for that one. But his overall rating, I've taken that from an 80 to a 79, just because personally I rate Magnussen higher than Grosjean. I think this could be Roman's last season. That's just my personal opinion. I feel like that loyalty to Haas is beginning to run out. Next thing I want to have a look at is Racing Point. Now, Sergio Perez, absolutely happy with that card. 85 rated, chill. No worries with that. Lance Stroll, nah, I'm sorry, what? What is that? So I feel like maybe Daddy Stroll has put a little bit of cash under the table here, perhaps, with this one. 78 rated is way too high for me overall, and experience and awareness, I'm happy with those, but 86 racecraft? Nah, I'm sorry, and 83 pace? Given his qualifying performances, especially last year, that's a big no from me. So, racecraft, I've given him a pretty big nerve here. I've gone from 86 down to 75. I don't think Lance has shown us that much. He's had a few kind of standout performances. I'm thinking Canada last year was one that really stands out for me, where he had that dismal qualifying, came back to the points. I think it was like P8 that he finished or something, but I don't think he can do that consistently enough to prove that value should be up there. Now, his pace, you know, this all stems from qualifying. 83 is way too high and way too close to Perez as well. So I've moved it down to a 76. And of course, that lowers his overall rating from 78 to a 75. That rating I've been pretty generous with. Probably could have gone lower. But yeah, this could be an interesting one. Obviously, Stroll's a bit of a controversial character. So let me know what you think about this one in the comments as well. So the next team I want to talk about then is Renault. Let's start with Esteban Ocon, who's obviously coming back into the sport after a year on the sidelines. This kind of makes it a little bit tricky to adjust values on, so I've not really changed things much. He's given an 80 overall, 54 experience, 90 racecraft, 79 awareness and 82 pace. The one value for me that just stuck out like a sore thumb there was the 90 racecraft. Just for me, and again we can compare him to his teammate here, Danny Rick, who we'll get onto in a second. He's also been given 90 racecraft, and the fact that Daniel is one of the best racers in the sport, I just wouldn't put the two on par. So I've lowered the 90 racecraft, maybe a little bit too harshly, I'll let you guys decide, down to an 83. I've not changed his overall rating. I think 80 is a solid rating for someone coming back into the sport like Ocon is. But yeah, 90 was just a little bit too high for me. You could argue his awareness might be a little bit lower as well, obviously with his clashes with Sergio Perez back when they were teammates, but given the fact that it was kind of 50-50 on those ones, I'm going to keep it as it is for now and give him the benefit of the doubt. Now, Daniel Ricciardo, it looks like a fairly solid card, 87 overall with some 90s in there as well for racecraft and pace, but for me, I still feel like he's been done a little bit dirty here. And that's not just the fact that I'm a massive Danny Ric fan, I will admit that one. Firstly, let's talk about experience. This is a guy who has been around since, 2011 he started with HRT, so 76 experience, having had 8 or 9 seasons in F1 by this point is a little bit on the low side. And personally, I've ranked that up a fair bit, up to an 85. Racecraft as well, as I touched on earlier, this is one of the best overtakers in Formula 1 at the moment. So 90, it's good, but I think he needs to be a little bit higher. So I've chucked up to a 93. I have given a slight nerve and awareness though, and that's just because in his last year, especially with Renault, there have been the odd mistakes creeping in. So I'm thinking Albert Park, where he had that crash before getting down to turn 1, and then obviously Baku, where he did reverse into Kvyat. So for me, I've taken the 86 awareness that he originally had down to an 85. But given the boost in the other 2 stats, I've moved his rating from an 87 to an 89. That's just my opinion. Maybe there's a little bit of fanboying in there, but I'll leave that up to you in the comments. While we are talking midfield teams, let's finish on McLaren. Now this, as I said at the beginning, is the cars that as of time of recording, we haven't got values for yet. So I've kind of made these mock-ups here, and yeah, let's just talk through them. Let's begin with the Ferrari-bound Carlos Sainz. I've gone with 86 overall, which for me is pretty fair. 75 experience, haven't been around since 2015, I think. Racecraft, I've gone for an 87, given some of his incredible overtakes. The one on, I think it was Stroll or maybe Perez, one of the Racing Points in Brazil really comes to mind with that one. He's a very, very good racer, and, this is a guy going to Ferrari, so these stats are going to be pretty high. Awareness, I've gone for 85. I can't think of many cases where he's made massive mistakes on track, so I think 85 is a nice, solid kind of base mark for him, and maybe that will go up next year. We'll have to wait and see. And then pace, 88. This guy is very, very quick. So 88, maybe looking back on that, it might be a little bit high. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But yeah, let's move on to Lando Norris, shall we? So Lando obviously going into his 2nd year in Formula 1. I can't go too crazy on the stats here, and you'll notice that they are all a little bit lower than Sainz, even though Lando did beat him in qualifying pace, so you've got to give him that. But I've gone for an 80 overall with 55 experience. That kind of puts him on par with some of the other rookies from last year. Racecraft with 80. Again, we've seen some pretty good overtakes, but I don't think we've seen everything from Lando yet. And the same thing kind of goes with the awareness. I've been a little bit cautious on that one. Did have a few retirements in 2019. Not all of them, in fairness, were his fault, though. You've got to add that. But yeah, 78 awareness for me, I think, was a nice kind of starting value. Maybe that will go up when we start seeing him next year. You'll never know. Finally then, pace, 82. Looking back at this in the edit, I maybe feel this was possibly a little bit too harsh. Maybe I should have put that up to an 85, something a bit closer to Sainz, given how close they were on track. But yeah, like I said, let me know what you think down in the comments below, and by the time this video goes out, I bet these numbers will be out anyway. So yeah, we'll talk about them and we'll see how right or probably wrong I was. Okay, so now we're on to the top 3 teams, and in fairness, I think the majority of the top 3 teams were done pretty well. There was maybe 1 or 2 drivers in each case that I wasn't really happy with. So starting with Red Bull, Verstappen, absolutely fine. 90 rating overall, 68 experience, 94 racecraft, 84 air awareness, 96 pace, fine. Alex Albon, though, I feel like has been bigged up a little bit too much. I think a lot of this stems back from his move to Red Bull mid-season last year. If he's in the AlphaTauri this year, I feel like this car would be a little bit lower. That's just my personal opinion. But the original car is a 79 overall, so that's pretty good. 52 experience, which I agree with, kind of matches the other rookies on the grid. 87 racecraft, 78 awareness, 83 pace. 87 racecraft, I'm a little bit torn. He did prove that he had something in those last few races with Red Bull, but for me, he's not proven to me that fully yet. So I've gone down to an 85 for that one, and that for me has moved his rating down from a 79 to a 78. This one I feel like could be quite a hotly contested one in the comments, so let me know if you think I've made the right decision here. Moving on to Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel, I'm pretty happy with that card. 89 rated, 88 experience, 89 racecraft, 81 awareness. Maybe it's a little bit too high thinking back, but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt for now. And then 94 pace, absolutely fun with that. Charles Leclerc, he's got a pretty solid card already, but I still feel like he's been done a little bit dirty, just on the experience side of things. They've given him 56 experience, and, thinking of the fact that kind of matches drivers like George Russell and Lando Norris, who have had 1 year less in the sport than Leclerc has, I've raised that up to a 60, and for me that moves his rating from an 86 to an 87. Now, I just wonder if Codemasters are trying to be careful not to make these guys too close to each other, given that Leclerc is only in his 3rd year in Formula 1, and Sebastian's obviously been here since 2007 now, so maybe, you know, they were trying to just show, let there be a little bit of a divide between these two, but for me, I think Leclerc is very, very close to Vettel, and so 87, 2 marks off Vettel, that fits for me. And so, finally then, we move on to Mercedes, the world champions, and, you know, Lewis Hamilton, 6-time world champion, possibly a 7-time world champion next year. I'm pretty happy with that 94 rating overall. 89 experience, makes sense. 93 racecraft, 95 awareness, 96 pace, absolutely fine. No qualms with that at all. Valtteri Bottas, on the other hand, I'm not so sure on that one. So they've gone with a 90 rated card overall with 71 experience, 89 racecraft, 99 awareness and 91 pace. Yeah, those last 2 values I'm not too sure about. I feel like this is kind of where a lot of the hate towards these ratings have come out. But let's edit those real quick. So for a driver to have 99 awareness, they can't have made a single mistake in their career, and Bottas has made a fair few, especially in practice sessions. Also threw away a result at Germany last year, and that's not the first time. So I've lowered that down fairly harshly to a 90. I think that's a bit more fitting of his ability. And then pace, I've also lowered down a little bit. I just feel that 91 was a little bit too close to Hamilton, and, you know, Hamilton is currently a step ahead of pretty much the rest of the grid, bar maybe a Leclerc or a Verstappen. Hamilton is very, very quick at the moment. He's right in his element. So I've lowered Bottas's pace from a 91 to an 89, so not a massive change there, but that does mean I've lowered his overall rating from 90 to 88. That's just my view though. Obviously there's a few Bottas fans out there, which I imagine will have different views on that, but yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments below. But that's about it from me today then. What did you think about these driver ratings? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree? I imagine the majority will disagree, but hey, well, we'll start a little debate down in the comments. Why not? While you're down there, don't forget to leave a like on the video, and of course subscribe as well for weekly F1 content. We'll be doing a little bit of F1 2020 gameplay when the game does come out in less than a month now, so yeah, let me know what you want to see in regards to that. But yeah, hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.